Hello and welcome to Releasing Your Inner Dragon, where story creators talk about story creation. If you have any suggestions or comments, please email them to releasingyourinnerdragon@gmail.com. Your hosts are Maxwell Alexander Drake, who, in addition to teaching creative writing around the world, is an award-winning novelist and former lead fiction writer for Sony's EverQuest Next. He's also written for other game properties like Shadowrun, written comic books, stage plays, musicals, sold movie scripts, and is currently producing an animated TV show that he's written and directed titled Guards. And Marie Mullaney, author of Songwheel Chronicles and YouTuber of the fantasy world-building channel Just in Time Worlds. We hope you enjoy this episode. Of Releasing Your Inner Dragon. With me is Drake, as always, and we are going to talk about character arcs.
And story arcs, too.
Yeah, and story arcs.
You can't really have one without the other.
So today, we're going to start by talking about the hero's journey arc, that very often used and misused arc. So, Drake, before
you roll your eyes and feel like you're going to fast forward through this, I wouldn't. I would suggest this is, yes, the hero's journey. It has those undertones of overused and oh, I want to be unique and oh, whatever. I guess this is a disclaimer that I never have made in any other podcasts, but I've had a few people reach out to me. Remember, everything I say is pretty much opinions. I'm not going to fact check myself. If I say something incorrect, I don't care. Yeah. This isn't like life or death stuff that we're talking about here. But on that note, I would say 80% of all stories, all movies, all everything are following the structure of the hero's journey, and there's a reason for it. So I think that's what we're mostly going to be discussing today.
Let's start by defining what the hero's journey is.
Some people lock into other, different aspects of it, but to me, it really is about starting a character off with no ability to overcome the obstacle of the story that we're about to take them through. And that obstacle is not blowing up a Death Star. It's not, getting a magic sword and slaying a dragon. It's not any of those things. Those are events. The obstacle of the story is the thematic element of the story. The character is going to start on the wrong side of the thematic element. Through their journey, they're going to learn that they're on the wrong side of the thematic element, and the overcome is them transferring to the right side of the thematic element, which is how, without telling the readers or audience what the thematic element is, it's how they consume the thematic element. They consume it because they've watched this person and they innately get, they're struggling against this, human theme or that human theme. So that's really what the hero's journey is to me. It's a scaffolding for your story, a structure that has tons and tons and tons of elements that you're going to use to take this character who is unprepared to overcome the story and go through these very defined human elements that are lessons that start to show them they're on the wrong side, and eventually through these journey. And so that's one of the biggest, I guess I want to start there. One of the biggest misconceptions about the hero's journey, when you're talking about, oh, it's so overused, I want something else. The problem is it's not, because there are hundreds of aspects of the hero's journey that most have never been used, or are used so rarely you might as well say they've never been used. There are some key elements of the hero's journey that are always used, and so those are the ones that kind of get popped.
So let's talk about those. Which are the ones that are always used and that end up being misused?
There's some structure moments to the hero's journey that kind of have to be there. You might be way smarter than me and figure out ways to get around these, but some of the everyman, introducing the character that is going to be relatable to the audience. That is a step that is vitally important but in every story, redemption arcs or anything else that you want to talk about. If you don't make me give a crap about the character and give a crap about them actually accomplishing something, then I'm never going to give a crap about your story. I'm just not. And so that everyman, it's one of the things that me personally, I struggle with a lot with industry folk, because I really love my everyman moments. And so every story that I start always starts off in these very mundane, very passive kind of moments that are vital to the process. So case in point, my most famous book that's won several awards, The Farmers and Mercenaries, the first book to it.
Yeah.
So that book opens up with the big lion dude in a cell.
Yeah.
And it never leaves. He's in the cell, period. The camera never leaves. Some people come to the door and talk to him, but that's it. Nothing happens. And so the editor of that book was Patrick Labruto. He's edited for Isaac Asimov and Raymond Feist and Louis L'Amour. And like one of my favorite comments of his is he says, his biggest claim to fame is he's the first American author to reject The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy because he knew it would never work. So he makes mistakes or whatever. So when he read the first book of the Genesis saga, he came back to me and sat down and he's like, look, man, you're one of the best action writers I've ever read in my entire life. Like, your action scenes are just incredible. Your third chapter is this big fight scene with this massive lion dude. You have got to start there. You want to start a book right in the action and right in the mix. And that's a thing that the industry says all the time. Now, this is my first published book, and he's my first big name editor. And I'm like, I don't necessarily agree with you, but like, you've been in the industry for 30 years and I'm some punk schmuck, just writing my first book, or, not my first book that I've written, but the first one that has now been sold and getting ready to be published. And so I'm like, okay, and so I ended up having to write the first 9 chapters of the book. I had to rewrite things to actually get it to the point where it worked with this big fight scene. And so I finished it. It takes me about 3 months. I finish it. I send it back to him, and he goes, so what do you think? I'm like, I don't think it works as good. I think it works better when it starts in that cell. And he's like, trust me, I know what I'm talking about. You're nobody, nothing. And I've been doing this forever. And so he goes and he reads it. And a couple of days later, we have a meeting, and he's like, so I'm going to say something. If you ever admit that I said, I'm just going to deny it and say you're lying. But he's like, because I've never told a first-time author this. You're right. I don't know why, but it doesn't work. I'm like, well, the reason why it doesn't work is it's a 900-pound, 7.5-foot tall lion dude killing a bunch of humans. It doesn't matter. No one cares. They don't care about the lion dude yet. He's obviously going to slaughter all of them. They're so overmatched, it's not even funny. And so there's no enjoyment in the fight. But when you get that moment where you're in this very somber, very, our intimate and personal relationship with this lion dude in this 3,000-word, 4,000-word chapter, where he's never leaves his cell, you care about him in that fight scene. You care whether he lives or dies and all this stuff. And so, it ended up getting published the way I originally wrote it, because it matters. It matters that every moment is there.
That introduction of the character to the hero's journey is very critical. It's one of the things that I wrestled with as well, because somebody said to me, you should start with the action in the book. And I was like, I can't. My main character in The Hidden Blade is an assassin. If I start with the first body hitting the floor from his knife in the first chapter, how am I going to get my readers to care about this dude who apparently just slaughters people out of hand? Even a human killer, those are not the kind of people we invite into our homes and have dinner with.
Can it be done? Sure. There are plenty of examples of starting a story where the character is in the midst of action, and also you do a great job of that everyman moment where you connect the reader to the character in the moment of the action. Absolutely, it can happen. But my point is that's one of those structures of hero's journey that you have to do. And if you don't do it, like the rewrite of that, when I just started the lion dude off in his killing spree, there's nothing in there. So, and it also comes down to, if I was going to, because my mind has been wandering, like, well, how would you start something in like this big battle scene? Well, the stakes would have to matter, and it would have to matter bigger than the character. So the problem with the lion dude fight for me is he's a gladiator, he's a slave. And so it literally is, he's just there for the entertainment of the crowd. His stakes are, sure, he could die, but then his story's over and I can't really do much with that. So there's no.
There's a World War II movie that opens with them landing on a beach somewhere.
On Normandy, yeah. That's Saving Private Ryan.
Saving Private Ryan. And I mean, that is one hell of an action sequence.
See, that's the one example that I was thinking.
But you get that everyman moment in every second of every one of those soldiers getting shelled, getting the bombardment,
even the ones that die.
Even the ones that die. You're like, that could be me. Yeah.
It is, and that's the one that was coming to mind of, can you have these everyman moments in an absolutely, there's examples of them. And Saving Private Ryan is definitely like that Normandy beach scene is
wow
and just horrifying and like,
and it went on for 45 minutes or something. It went on forever.
It feels like it goes on for hours because it's so emotionally brutal. Strange New World, that moment where we leave the world that the everyman first starts in. Now in Saving Private Ryan, they don't have a moving to, when you start in the Strange New World, it really is kind of just all there all the time, and that's fine. 12 Monkeys kind of does the same thing where you already start, but that's the difference between starting a story before the inciting incident versus after the inciting incident. So in Saving Private Ryan, the war's already on. Like the inciting incident is really, that. And that one you could say maybe not. You could say the inciting incident is getting the news that there's one brother left and all the other brothers have been killed. And so we now need to preserve this family. And, saving this family is more important to us. And the individual family's legacy is more important to us than the big scope of the war. And so,
I guess you could then say that the Strange New World that they then move into is one where they are not fighting the Germans.
You could, like I said, it doesn't work as well with Saving Private Ryan. But when you look at something like Shawshank Redemption, the inciting incident has already happened. He's already murdered his wife.
Well, he hasn't, but he's been accused of it.
Right. So you think, in 12 Monkeys, the world has already fallen and the Bruce Willis character is already in prison being used for scientific experiments to try to travel back in time to save the universe. So like there's ways, and that's the thing. And this is exactly what it is. So the inciting incident is another one of those key things in the hero's journey that you got to kind of do, that you have to have something that pushes them into the Strange New World story. Right. But you can twist it and already have the inciting incident have already happened. The problem is now that you still have to build the everyman, so now all that becomes backstory that you're trying to do as flashbacks, and those are a little weaker and harder to pull off successfully than just starting. And again, there's a lot of reasons why I start almost every story that I've written always starts in these more mundane moments, because it allows me just that nugget of time to make sure that my readers give a crap about this character. They actually can go, wow, he's a lot. I mean, that's what you're doing with the everyman. He's a lot like me. I could be that person. I could do this thing. I don't have fur and claws and fangs, and I'm not 900 pounds and 7.5 foot tall, but I could still relate to this lion dude monster in this cage. There's so much humanity in him, and there's so much suffering, and there's so much that you get out of it that you're like, wow, I want this guy. I don't even know where the story's going. I want this guy to succeed. Like all of my fans were like, oh yeah, no, I finished that chapter and I couldn't wait to see how he got out of bondage and how he got out of slavery and how he gets out of this and how he gets out of that. And they were like, but I don't know where you were going at that point. Like I had no idea what's going on. So, and that's what we're doing. And that's those are all the elements. That's not necessarily in the everyman. That's in your, your hooks to your opening of your scene. Different.
Yeah. Let's talk about the transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because here I feel is where, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to beat all young adult fantasy, because there are some young adult fantasy that I thoroughly enjoy. Mercedes Lackey's books are great, and that's young adult fantasy. There is a ton. of young adult fantasy that is completely trash, because they think,
so
the
you said
authors think that the transformation means learning new skills.
I actually think it's a problem across the board in every age category, not just young adult. The misusing of, so and you've hit it really right on the head. Transformation, in my opinion, is the number one misused, misunderstood, whatever. And again, it's because themes are so misunderstood and not used and all of that. Transformation has nothing to do, well, and this all comes back to why I feel, these books that I feel are bad, or these movies that I feel are bad, is because exactly what you said. The writers focus in on things. They focus in on events. Like, oh, my character has to become a sword master, or they have to become a laser, gun master, or they have to learn a new language, or they have to learn this, or these are things. They don't matter to the story. Remember, the story is not the characters, the events, the setting, the world, any of that. That's not the story. The story is the theme.
Yeah.
That's what the story is. All the rest of these physical layer elements are only there to drive the story. So if you don't have a theme, you don't have a story. You have a series of events. And so, yeah, that's the thing, is they think they need to transform the farm boy to the wizard.
Yeah.
And that is, you do have transformation on the physical layer, which is why it's confusing. You do need to transform the farm boy to the wizard so that he has the physical abilities to overcome the story. But transformation really is about the character starting on the wrong side of the theme, and then learning these lessons of why they're on the wrong side of the theme and why. And it ties in such a deep level. I mean, like Theme 101 from the Drake U courses. I'll just give you that real quick. You have to know your theme, because if you're writing a hero's journey, which is 80% of what we're doing, you have to start the character on the wrong side of the theme. How can you start a book if you don't know what your theme is? Because if you don't know what your theme is, you have no idea where to start the character. So I love using Finding Nemo as my example for this in all my classes, because most people have seen it, and it was so brilliantly written. It's great to use. So when we look at, and again, there's two stories in Finding Nemo. There's the Nemo story arc, and there's the Marlin story arc. Marlin's the daddy fish. I don't teach the Nemo. It's a coming of age thematic element, and it's actually not the interesting part of the story to me, because I'm a parent when I see that. My kids are 2, 3, 4.
Oh my word! If you want to talk about overdone stories, coming of age.
Yeah, 100%. But going with the Marlin story arc, when we look at the thematic element of that, the theme is, what type of parent should you be? Yeah. Should you be an overprotective parent that doesn't allow your kids to be in any danger ever? Is that the right way to raise a child? Or should you be the type of parent that allows your children to take a little bit of risk, take a little bit of danger, but make sure that you're the safety net so that they learn, because eventually they become adults and they move off in the world, and you can't be their safety net forever. Yeah. And so, and again, one of the things about a story is it doesn't matter about what your personal opinion is. It's about what the story is trying to prove. So whether you agree or not with which way to raise children, the story proves in the story that being an overprotective parent is terrible. And being a parent that allows your kids to take risks and fail, but be there to make sure they don't die, is the right way to parent. Now, again, we're talking about in the story. So if you disagree with that statement, then that's great. But this is the world of the story. We're going to prove this in the story. I personally agree with that. And I raise my kids that way. I'm the dad who, like, the kid would be, the 4-year-old's walking over to the electric outlet with his finger out. And my wife is like, oh my God. I'm like, no, it's fine. It's fine. Just let him go. It won't kill him, but he will never do that again. And so, that's the type of parent I was. And then it's, and then, are you ever going to do that again? No. I'm like, yeah, that's a dumb thing to do. You shouldn't do that. It actually never happened. Like, I've actually had people come up to me after I say that in class, and they're like, man, I can't believe you did that to one of your sons. They're actually smart enough not to have stuck their finger in electrical outlets, which is funny because I did it. I did it when I was like 6.
I didn't do it. I didn't ever touch an electrical socket, but I touched an electric fence.
Right. Right. I mean, everybody's been shocked by
Yeah.
some stupid, something for the most part. When we know our theme, when we know that the Marlin theme is about that, there's a couple things that are vitally important. First of all, it explains where the character starts. So when we meet Marlin, and again, one of the weird things about Finding Nemo is there's an entire hero's journey in the first 90 seconds of the film. There's a complete separate story that has a start, rise in tension, a thematic element, and an ending in 90 seconds. It is so freaking brilliant. And that's where they built their everyman moment into. But the story really starts after the wife is dead, the 399 kids are dead, and now Marlin is just with the one child. And the child is now grown up. We skip in time, and the child is now school age.
Yeah.
And that's what the story that I'm talking about. So the other 90 second is literally a class all in its own on that one 90-second story.
That's an amazing story.
It's so brilliantly written. Yeah. But getting into this, the bigger story, the Marlin story arc. So when we know that the theme is about which type of parent to be, Marlin has to start on the side that we're not going to prove, that we're going to prove is wrong. Yeah. So he starts as this he's like, hey, it's the first day of school, but you really don't need to learn anything. You could just stay home because it's way too dangerous out there. You don't even need to go to school. Yeah. Like he's so overprotective. He's willing to let his child be an uneducated moron and never learn anything, as long as it means that he never leaves the house and is always safe. Yeah. So that's the first thing that you have to know your theme for, because you have to know where the character starts. But the second thing, and this is the hardest part, this actually, in my opinion, is the hardest part of writing a hero's journey, harder than the climax. And the climax is the second hardest part. The inciting incident because remember, the thing about themes, you have to have one and you can never mention it. How do you deliver a theme that you can never mention? Well, you have to hit certain things. And one of the things you have to hit is the inciting incident has to be caused because the character is on the wrong side of the theme. Because then subconsciously the audience starts to get that the whole debacle and the whole reason for this journey and all this craziness that's happening is because you were so dumb that you were on the wrong side of the theme and fighting it from the beginning. And they do it, and that is hard. I spend so much time in plotting going, yeah, okay, I want to do this theme, but how does that theme cause the story? How do I create an event that's going to make it that theme, and him being on the wrong side of the theme that's causing? So in Finding Nemo, it's the scene where all the kids are on the edge of the coral, and they're looking out, and there's that human boat. They call it the butt. Yeah, and they're daring each other, go touch the butt. I dare you to go touch the butt. Now, if Nemo was doing some other type of theme, he might do whatever. But remember, Nemo's story has nothing to do with that. Yeah. So what does Nemo do? Because Nemo's story needs him to be a person who actually does listen to his parents. Yeah. So when the kids are like, Nemo, go touch the butt, Nemo doesn't go, okay, because that's bending to peer pressure. That's a different thematic element. That's a whole different story that we would tell if we went down that path. Nemo goes, no, no, no. My dad says that's dangerous. I'm not doing that. That would be wrong. And it would make my dad mad. And so like that starts to build his thematic side on what he is. But here's the thing. The story has to be launched because Marlin is on the wrong side of the theme. So Marlin shows up, and what does he do? He overreacts and he goes, how dare you even think about doing this? What? Don't you dare do that. And that's when Nemo goes, oh, right. You're on the wrong side of the theme, aren't you, Dad? Well, I guess I got to go get kidnapped now to prove that you're on the wrong side of the theme. And so he swims out, but he only does it after Marlin comes in on the wrong side of the thematic element, of his thematic element. And so then Nemo goes out, touches the butt, gets kidnapped, and now we have to enter that strange new world. That's the inciting incident that creates the story for Marlin. It's also the inciting incident that creates the story for the coming of age, which is all about life without your parents for the very first time, making your own decisions, relying on yourself, all of those things that have to go into the coming of age story on. But again, the inciting incident has to be there It's just, how do you do it? How cleverly can you make it happen? And how can you make it tie into the fact that your character is on the wrong side of the theme? So that, there's these building blocks of the hero's journey that have to be there.
Yeah.
But then there's so many different elements of the hero's journey that just go on and on and on. And when you start really studying these things, like, oh my God, there's a billion ways to use that one thing.
Yes.
And so that's what I think people miss.
I guess for me, the reason why it feels overused is because everybody calls the coming of age, and by everybody, I mean the young adult world specifically. The problem is that it is the biggest fantasy genre at the moment. And I know it's not supposed to be a genre, but it's marketed as that now. So that's the reality. And it's the one that most people seem to want to write for, which means that they write simplistic stories and they write coming of age stories. But here's the part that really, that makes me feel all like I hate you guys so much right now. They write coming of age stories and then they call them the hero's journey. If every story is a coming of age story, believe me, by the 79th one that I've read, I've had enough. Can I have a grown up hero who knows how to do things?
And I think that's less about the structure and more about emulation. I think it's less about, coming of age or even hero's journey, and more about, I, the writer, don't really know what the hell I'm doing. I've just consumed a bunch of stories. And so therefore, that's been my only education. And so now that's all I've really got to draw upon, is that well of experience. I've read a lot, I've watched a lot, whatever. So I see these same motifs over and over and over again. And so when I get into my creative mode, which comes from my well of experiences, that's all I got. All I got is, I watched Twilight 20 times and Hunger Games 20 times. And so that's it. That's all I got. That's my gold standard of what I'm supposed to do. And so I'm going to do this. So I think it's less about the structures and much more about the lack of education. These guys get a great idea, but because they don't have that foundation of structure and theme and all this stuff, their endings just fail. And, I'll throw it out there. This is going to make me very unpopular because it's such a hugely successful and hugely popular show, but Stranger Things is amazing. They were amazing characters, amazing world building, amazing, just the whole 9 yards. Season 1 ended not good.
They have no idea how to end.
Not good. Yeah. Season 2 ended even worse.
Yeah.
And season 2 was great until the ending. Season 3, same exact thing. Even worse ending. They missed the total mark on everything that storytelling is about, even though all 3 seasons are fantastic in every other category. So, and I get that you can send the hate mail to me now. I know, boo Drake for poo-pooing on Stranger Things, but the endings are not good.
Yeah.
Does it ruin the fact that they were enjoyable to watch? To me, yes, but to most people, no. They still enjoyed the.
I mean, to everybody who's watched who's watched Game of Thrones, the TV series. I mean, I know you haven't, but to everybody who's watched that and who felt that season 5 to 8, but really season 7 and 8 destroyed everything that was amazing about the first season. It's the ending sucked. Why it is, in part, is because I don't know if you know anything about 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh yeah. Quite a bit.
Now, I have neither read nor watched the movies because
I've memorized the line. My favorite line from that.
Which is what?
I memorized it because it's so bad on so many layers that it blows my mind that somebody would actually write this. And then again, I watched a movie last night that has these that also had a line that blew my mind. So these are both things. I'll do both of them. They're both things that if you had come to my writers group, I would mercilessly taunt you for having written these in an unpublished, whatever. Yeah. And these are both produced. But the line that I memorized from 50 Shades. Mm-hmm. So first of all, it's in all caps, which is always great to see inside of prose.
Always.
So it's in all caps, and it says, "What the F do you think you're doing, you stupid B?" And then 3 exclamation points. I screamed loudly in my mind.
I can't even.
Poetic. And then I'm working on getting a kids movie greenlit. Matter of fact, I got a meeting tomorrow with some big things that are going on. So I'm kind of excited about it. But this company, one of the things they kind of docked me on was they said that the kids movie dialogue is too conversational, that they would have liked to have seen more subtext
In a kids movie.
Right. Okay. So, but they actually have done another movie that is their last kids movie that they did, that rated way higher, because I got to see their breakdown of that script. And one of the things, so they do 10 categories, and I crushed it on 8 of the 10 categories, but 2 of the categories it beat me on, one by a smidge, but one by actually a lot, like by 20%. And that was dialogue. Okay. And so I'm like, okay, well, because it's a kids movie too, let me watch this. It's on Netflix. So let me watch this and kind of see if I can learn something from this. And there's a scene where there's a villain trying to get out of a window, and a dog bites him in the butt. Okay. And the villain then goes, you bit me in the butt. You're a butt biter. And I'm like, so first of all, I don't see subtext there. And second of all, that's one of those things, if somebody had brought that to one of my writers groups, I would taunt them mercilessly for having written that. It is so bad. And I'm like, wow. And this is better than my dialogue. How? So like, yeah, I'm like, that's, it's not only not subtext, it's literally horrible dialogue. So anyway, it's
so anyway, so to get back to my point with 50 Shades, right? Now 50 Shades was originally published online on like a Wattpad equivalent, etc.
Yeah.
And
it's fanfic. It's shift fanfic from Twilight.
But it's published as basically and I'm not speaking down to these people, because I have read works like that sometimes when I'm really bored and just looking for something ridiculous to completely, not quite that, but things in that nature. So I'm not speaking down to these people, but it's written for like people sitting on a train or people at home just looking for like 5 minutes of reading something. So that's elementary.
Actually, I'll maybe go against that a little bit, because it was erotica. And so
it's written for
write erotica. I do write romance. I write sweet romance. So for me, it's all about the final kiss at the end. That's where the story stops. Like my least favorite joke that I tell that my wife absolutely hates, I say I write sweet romance because after that first kiss, everything is downhill from there. That's the best your relationship is going to be. My wife hates that joke, especially since we married 22 years. You got to remember, when you're writing certain things, when you're writing a genre piece, when you're writing post-apocalyptic, YA, when you're writing fantasy, Western, whatever, hero's journey, redemption arcs, coming of age, all of these different things, you're only writing them for one reason: to make the reader feel what they're looking to feel. The reason why there's so many genres is because readers want to feel what they want to feel. And if a genre doesn't give them that feel, they'll look for another genre that does. And erotica and I've said this at romance conventions before, the beautiful thing about erotica is they are the least critical fans that exist, because all they want is that gushy feeling inside. Do you give them that gushy feeling? And I'm being politically correct by saying gushy feeling and not other things. You give them that gushy feeling inside. If you do, they don't give a crap about how horrible the writing is. They care about the gushy feeling. And as long as they get that, as long as they have the ability to use that erotica for their own personal, ends, say it like that, then they're fine. They don't care. And so I don't fault 50 Shades for what it was when it was just flat out erotica.
And I don't either. What I fault it for is when it shows up on a movie screen and says, I want to be judged as a movie. like I watch, there's a YouTuber that I like, Jeremy Jans, who, when he reviewed 50 Shades of Grey, he was like, you know, Debbie Does Dallas knows what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't expect you to look at the story. It knows you're going to skip through the bit.
Gushy feeling inside.
Yeah. But 50 Shades of Grey sat up there and went, I want to be judged as a theatrical release. And it wasn't. It's the same with the books. That they're not. They're erotica, and they should be in their genre.
Yeah. And it should absolutely be a success. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of people are like, oh, 50 Shades should never. No, it absolutely should. It literally gave its audience what its audience was looking for. Yeah. That is, to me, is the definition of why you should be a success. Should it be a success in the literary field? Should it be considered a good, good example of great storytelling? No.
Hero's journeys.
Getting back to the hero's journey.
So let's talk about the elements that can do the transformation, or the things that initiate transformation. One of the interesting things is that there is a structure around having a mother figure involved in the transformation.
There's really two concepts that Joseph Campbell came up with and he named that do kind of add to these confusion of this. There's mother as goddess and the atonement of the father. And I think because we have mother and father in these, but to me, and my understanding of them transcends that, because they're more about the character's feminine and masculinity. Now, I do want to preface this by saying, because I just feel like I have to every time because of the crazy world that we live in. Feminine traits have nothing to do with girls, and masculine traits have nothing to do with boys. We just, as humans, have to put things in boxes. We have to categorize things so that we can have, that's what language is. It's defining things so that when we talk to each other, we kind of know what each other is saying. So if I say there was a fish in my ear, you can go, oh, there was a fish in your ear. And I go, no, it's actually a knife. Like, no, like if we don't know what a fish is, then we can't have that communication. Yeah. So feminine traits are the ones that are considered classically more feminine, the nurturing, the caring, the more feminine side. And again, it has nothing to do with female. It has to do with that. And the masculine traits are the more aggressive, more, violent, whatever. Those are the more masculine traits. And again, both women and men have both feminine traits and masculine traits. And so to me, those things, what I look for when I'm, plotting out my stories is every character starts heavy on one side or the other, because, you have to, the difference between writing for the medium of movies and writing for the medium of prose is, in a movie, we're going to get this visual thing. I can throw up and in 1 second give you just tons and tons of information by this image. But in prose, I get one word that then leads to one word, that then leads to one word that hopefully create a sentence. And then there's a couple sentences that hopefully create a paragraph. Like, I'm limited by this structure of how I roll information out. So most of the time you're going to start a character that leans feminine or leans masculine. And so what the mother of goddess and the atonement of father are, to me, are more, and the atonement of father is actually different. I'm using it incorrectly here. I'm using it in why I think that it gets confused because of the word father. So what I try to look for in those instances is, if I have a character that's more feminine, I look for scenes that will force them to become more masculine or use more of those masculine traits. And if I have someone that's more masculine, I look for ways to force them to use those feminine traits. The example I always use is Conan. Conan novels open up almost the same way every time. Conan has scored a bunch of money. He's got, a bunch of prostitutes on his lap. He's got a bunch of food. He's drinking and drunk. And a demon attacks the town, and some dude runs in and goes, Conan, you're the only one that can save us from this demon. And he's like, piss off. I've got a whore and I've got wine, and I don't care about your stupid demon. Yeah. But then a little girl comes in, a little 6-year-old girl comes in, and she's crying, and she's like, the demon just killed my mommy. And Conan goes, oh, all right, I will go kill the demon now. So it's tapping into the more, because Conan is so masculine in the beginning, we look for those opportunities to bring in those feminine traits. Again, nothing to do with male or female. Yeah, we're just gonna put these these labels on these things. technically Mother as Goddess and the Atonement Father is not about those things. But I think the words that Campbell chose to title them kind of brings that in, because the Atonement of the Father literally is about the Mother as Goddess is actually that way. So, traditionally back in 800,000 years ago, when women were not real, stories were very men. They were all about men. And so what, the Iliad and what, Beowulf and these classic stories that were written thousands of years ago in a world that is very different than ours. And again, that's why I said women didn't exist back then. Those
not below the neck anyway.
Right. Those storytellers knew that they needed to have their masculine characters get some of these feminine traits. So Mother as Goddess are those moments where you look for opportunities to make your masculine character more feminine. And so now in a modern day where we realize that there is no difference between men and women for the most part, you can kind of change the definition of Mother as Goddess to both mean looking for more feminine traits for your masculine and looking for more masculine traits for your feminine. And so, what that does is that gives us a balanced character that we are much more apt to root for. The Atonement of the Father actually has nothing to do with that. That's about the character coming into contact with the ultimate big bad way before they're ready to deal with the big bad. So like in Star Wars, it's the moment where Darth Vader kills Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Luke Skywalker can't fight Obi-Wan Kenobi, or can't fight Darth Vader at that moment. He would just die. But that's that Atonement of the Father moment where it's like, oh my God, like that's what I have to deal with at some point. I can't do that. Like he just killed my mentor, who I can't even, go toe to toe with. So what am I going to do with that? So that's what really, but again, it has that father moment that I think adds to this confusion of what, do we need a mother in our story? Do we need a father in our story? And these are more abstract concepts that Campbell was really kind of talking about and defining as he was creating the definitions of what he had discovered through, storytelling over the last 5,000 years. And that's kind of the amazing thing about Campbell in my mind. Campbell is probably one of the most brilliant people to ever break down stories and why things work and why they don't. And yet that man could not tell a story to save his life. Like, oh my goodness, is he a horrible storyteller? Every example, it was just like, oh God, kill me. Just kill me. I don't, just stop. So that's the weirdest thing about Campbell. But he was a professor. He wasn't a guy that was trying to be a storyteller. He was a guy trying to understand storytelling. Like one of the things that I've just recently happened with this kids movie script. So it is for middle grade. And one of the producers was looking at this and he's like, the characters' parents are really interesting. I really wish you would have spent some time developing them. And I'm like, well, first of all, I get 120 minutes and the script is 119 minutes long. So, don't really have any more time to delve into things.
Yeah.
But also beyond that, because I'm also writing the prose version, I'm writing the novelization of this kids movie that I wrote. It's the first time I've ever gone that direction, where I wrote a movie script completely as a movie script, and now I'm writing it as a novel. Normally, I've gone the other way, but I am going to expand upon it more in the novel because I have more time, but not probably at the level that even this producer would appreciate, because it's still a middle grade novel. And there's a couple psychological things that you want to think about when you're producing for YA, for middle grade, for, all these different things. And one of the big differences is in middle grade, you want the parents to be a part of the story. You just don't want them to actually accomplish anything. You don't want them to be a part of it. When you move into YA, when you're getting into that coming of age, it's why the trope of the orphan is so overused, is because you absolutely want the parent not to be a part of the story, because you want the reader to focus in on that. Oh yeah, no, they're forced to have to deal with this stuff on their own. So, with the middle grade, you want to have them always know that that safety blanket could be there if things went awry. Like maybe the parents could step in or whatever. And so that is a difference. And it's just, again, it's just that psychological of understanding the audience that you're writing for. When kids, and for those of us, I mean, my kids are 17 and 19. So I've experienced this whole thing where, they absolutely adore you and everything you say is the best. And then there's this moment where you're an idiot and I hate you and I hate everything you stand for. Like it's this weird, crazy switch that happens in children's lives. And so as storytellers, we're doing the same thing, but we're just catering to that. Remember, a part of what we do is fantasy fulfillment. We're fulfilling the fantasies of our audience. And so, it's why I always say it's always about the reader. It's always about the reader. It's always about the reader. So, I disagreed with this producer and I explained to him, this is a middle grade. This is a story for 7 to 11-year-olds. They want to know that their parents at that age, parents are important. You want the parents to be a part of, they want the parents to be a part of their life, and they're not ready to deal with the fact of the loss of a parent or, all those things are way too big for what they want in their fantasy. Maybe they are from a broken home, or maybe they have lost a parent or whatever. Those things obviously happen, but entertainment is about fantasy fulfillment, and they're going to, whether they have parents or not, they are at that age, they're more wanting their characters that they're following to have both parents in the picture. Whereas older, get into that YA group, they don't want their parents to be in the picture. They don't want their parents to have anything to do with anything because they've now transferred to those horrible teenage years where they hate their parents' guts. And so, you have to think about that as a part of this. So off the topic, but I still think it was kind of interesting to, just to think about. So like you had actually were going down a path before I kind of took that over and ramrodded it. So where were you going with the mother and the father? Or did I hit it?
For me, it comes back to the things that I find overused. I was asked the other day by one of my early reviewers why I didn't include more female characters in The Hidden Blade, because I have very few female characters in The Hidden Blade. And one of the reasons is because there is a female character who is an authority figure to the main character, Louis, who I gave what is considered, which is much more typically masculine traits: remote, cold, harsh, aggressive. All of these traits go to her. The reason why I did that is because I am so tired of the trope of all of those traits always belonging to a male character, while there is a female, the mother character is always this gentle, nurturing. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be tied into the actual gender.
And again, I think that goes to the ignorance of they hear the term a feminine trait, they hear the term a masculine trait, and they, in their ignorance, just goes, oh, and it's ignorance on what you're saying. So now the writer is not doing it in a negative way. They just feel that women, feminine, male, masculine. Yeah, male characters can be all feminine. Female characters can be all masculine, but if they're going to be your hero, if they're going to be your protagonist that your audience is going to want to see succeed at the end of that, you're going to have to look for opportunities to make them more of the side that they're not.
Yes.
And that's going to make them a well-rounded character, because the reality is humans need to have both masculine and feminine traits. And everything we're talking about really just keeps boiling down to the education and the skill level and understanding of story structure and storytelling of the actual writer. Like that's really what it boils down to. It's why, you want to see me slap somebody at a convention, have them come up to me and say, I'm a writer, but I will never read anything because reading sucks. I'll just slap right there. Like I'll just get thrown out of the convention. I don't care. Because it's just such an insulting thing. If you're not reading, if you're not understanding this stuff, then you can't be a writer. That's like saying you're a surgeon, but you've never gone to medical school. No, you're a serial killer is what you are. You're not a surgeon. That's different. Completely different occupation. everything we're talking about boils down to, you know, the hero's journey is still 80% of all stories, and it should be. It's a fantastic, it's so robust that you'll never use all of it. It's so dynamic that individual pieces can be used in different ways. They can also be moved. You know, we already talked about the inciting incident can happen, you know, before the story even starts. It can happen after the story starts. Like, there's so much that you can do. The problem is again, if you've only read Twilight 100 times and Hunger Games 20 times, and you're like, I can now write a New York Times bestseller. No, you can't, because you've seen two very limited examples of very limited ways to use a very massive, you know, structure setup.
Yeah.
It's why, like, for my students, I'm like, look, you got to read Joseph Campbell's Heroes with a Thousand Faces. It's the driest, most boring book you're ever going to read in your entire life. Yeah. You're going to have to extrapolate a lot of information because he doesn't spell out anything. Yeah. But when you get done with that, you can move off into The Writer's Journey by Vaughn, or whatever his name is. Eventually, I'll finally finish my Hero's Journey book, which everybody's been waiting on. The cover's been made for it, so that's something, right? But you know, there's things out there. There's my classes. There's my other creative writing books. There's so many different things that you can do. You don't have to spend $150,000 to go to. And actually, I'm pretty much against MFAs now. I'm talking to these kids that are coming out of these programs, and I'm like, so you basically know nothing. Like, I mean, that's the thing. And I know that sounds harsh, and maybe I get in trouble for saying that as well. But like, they're just no longer teaching the things that I feel need to be taught. And I'm being generalized. Obviously, I mean, Brandon Sanderson teaches the MFA up at BYU. I love Sanderson. I love him as a writer. I love him as a teacher. We're friends, or at least convention friends. You know, I sit on his classes and I go, yeah, I say the same stuff that you say. We disagree about some things, and we pick on each other about a few little things, sure, because he's way more academic than I am. I'm way more blue collar, but we're both still saying the same thing. We both still believe in the same things. You know, I quote him several times in my classes. So I am certain that his MFA programs are teaching these, you know, students what things taught. Yeah. But you know, I also was watching this thing, this one English professor, fan of mine, had sent me this, where the person teaching MFA at his college has a new policy that they implemented about four years ago or so, where it's a new way to running a critique group. This is their critique group. So what they do, and I am using generic pronouns because I don't even want to say if this professor is male or female or what college they teach at or whatever. But what they do is they now, when they have a critique group, the writer reads what they want to get critiqued. And then the only one allowed to talk about it is the writer. Everyone else has to sit there and shut up, and no one can say anything about it. And I hate to tell you, that's not a critique group. You're not getting critiqued at all if you're the only one who's allowed to say anything about your writing. And it leads to the horrible artistic pride attitude that, oh, I am, you know, I'm the bee's knees and no one can tell me anything, and I'm perfect in every way. Like,
I don't even know what to say to that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like, the only reason why The Hidden Blade is a readable book is because my beta readers said to me, you have got to cut the prologue. It sucks. Yeah. And the first chapter is terrible. It's an info dump. They were right.
I say this all the time. If you're not in a critique writing group, you're not a writer. You're a typist. If you're listening to this right now and you're like, oh, I'm writing and I really want to be a writer, there is a critique writing group in your town. I promise you, there is. Google it, go to meetup.com, look for it. You know, if you're here in Vegas, there's like 5 or 6 huge writers groups here. Utah is probably the best state that I've ever been to for writers groups. They're literally everywhere. I think they've got something like 20 or 30 writers groups. Like, every single place that you live in is going to have a writers group. Find it, join it. You will never grow as a writer if 2 things aren't happening. First of all, to grow as a writer, you must critique other writers. You cannot grow as a writer if you're not critiquing other people's writing. And 2, you can't grow as a writer. People aren't critiquing your work, and you're actually listening to them. And I want to add something. If you are in that, one horse town and there absolutely is no writers group than yours, fine. If you have the internet, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of actual critique writers groups right on the internet you can join. And you can do it from the safety of your own home. All these things that we're talking about, all these pitfalls and all these shortcomings that these writers have
the amount,
literally come from lack of education.
The amount of improvement in my writing that came from starting a YouTube channel on world building is enormous.
It's one of the reasons why I started teaching 15 years ago. When I teach a topic, I had to research the crap out of it to actually make an hour-long class from it. Then I teach it. Every one of my classes I teach, because I, obviously not during this COVID craziness, but before then I was doing 20 to 25 conventions a year. And some of those conventions I'm teaching 6, 7, 8, 10 classes. So I do have about 20 classes that I teach. So I do rotate through them depending on what they are looking for and what they want me to add or whatever. But I'm still teaching every one of my classes 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year for the last 15 years. And, that is also another thing that has really pushed me. And then writing the books on creative writing have pushed me to really dig deeper than I normally would in those topics. So that's the reason why, I do that third aspect of it, the teaching side of it, is because, again, I'm doing it for selfish reasons. It makes me a better writer.
If you've enjoyed this episode, you will probably like Marie's YouTube channel, Just in Time Worlds, and Drake's courses on creative writing that he offers through Drake U. So make sure to check those out. If you have any suggestions or comments, please email them to releasingyourinnerdragon@gmail.com, and we will be back next week for another episode.